Hey everyone, welcome to Mad Backyard. Today we're going to show you how to smoke pulled pork on your Pit Boss pellet grill. We're going to show you step by step how to choose the best pork shoulder, trim it, season it, and smoke it right on your Pit Boss. So stay tuned. You can also check out the step-by-step recipe that accompanies this video at madbackyard.com. If it's your first time picking out a pork butt, you might see them labeled as Boston butt or pork shoulder or pork butt. They all basically mean the same thing. I wouldn't recommend choosing the biggest one in the store. Look for a pork shoulder in the 6 to 10 pound range. I'd also recommend going with a bone-in pork butt rather than a boneless one. Now the first thing you're going to need to do is trim off some fat from your pork butt. You can even do this the day beforehand to save yourself some time the day of the cook. Lay it out on a cutting board and get yourself a good knife. We like using a good boning knife when we're trimming fat off a pork butt, like this one from iMarku. I'll put a link to this knife in the notes if you want to check it out, along with all the other products we're using today. Start with the white, fattier side up. This is called the fat cap. You're going to want to trim this down to about 1/4 inch of thickness. This will help the rub stick to and penetrate the meat itself rather than being obstructed by the fat when it's cooking. Aim to trim off the really hard pieces of fat because they're not going to render very well when the meat cooks. Now you don't need to go crazy. Leaving a little bit of fat is okay. Like I said, about 1/4 inch of thickness. Next, we're going to season up the pork butt. You can also do this the day before and wrap it in plastic wrap when you're done. That way it's ready to go the next day when you throw it on the Pit Boss. Now you can really pick any kind of rub you like. Since we're only going to smoke this at around 250 degrees, don't worry about how much sugar's in your rub because it won't burn. After you're finished trimming the fat, cover the pork with a thin layer of cooking oil or yellow mustard. Don't worry about the mustard flavor. You won't taste it at all by the time this thing's done cooking, but it's actually one of the best ways to get the rub to stick to the meat. One of our favorite rubs for pulled pork is Three Little Pigs Kansas City Championship rub. Now be pretty generous with the amount of rub you put on. There's a lot of meat here that needs to be seasoned, and putting a good amount of rub on will help it form a nice bark while it's smoking. Now if you're doing this the day before, wrap the pork butt in plastic wrap and put it back in the refrigerator and it'll be ready to go tomorrow. Next, you're going to fill your hopper with pellets. You're going to need a lot because this is going to be a long cook. You can use any of your favorite barbecue pellets for pulled pork. However, we'd stay away from flavors like mesquite and maybe even hickory. In fact, for our Pit Boss pulled pork, we chose this Bear Mountain barbecue blend, and it had a really nice flavor. We made a video on how to empty your Pit Boss hopper to change out the pellets, so make sure to check that out if you need a refresher. We always keep our unused pellets indoors in an airtight container like this one from Oklahoma Joe's. Next, you're going to plug in and start up your Pit Boss pellet grill. Make sure your grates are in place, your flame broiler's closed, and that you've cleaned out the ash pot. It'll be on the smoke setting. Go ahead and leave it here until it goes through its startup process. If you need a refresher on how to start up your Pit Boss, especially if it's the first time you're using it, make sure to check out our video on how to start and season a brand new Pit Boss pellet grill. Once the Pit Boss has gone through its startup process and the white smoke's dissipated, go ahead and turn your temperature knob to 250 degrees and set it at that temperature. Close the lid and wait for the smoker to come up to temp. This will take about 10 to 15 minutes. If you didn't season your pork butt the night before, season it about 30 minutes before you put it on the Pit Boss. This will allow the rub to kind of settle into the meat and form a nice paste on the outside. This will help form the bark later on. When the Pit Boss is up to 250 degrees, go ahead and open the lid and put the pork butt in. We like to keep our pork butt on the right side of the grill, as the left side, being closer to the flame broiler, tends to get a little hot. Make sure the flame broiler door is closed if you have the direct heat option. Go ahead and close the lid. At 250 degrees, it's going to take about 1.5 hours per pound to fully cook a bone-in pork butt, so a 6-pound pork shoulder might take about 9 hours. Keep in mind, no two pieces of meat are the same, and depending on how much fat content, the humidity outside, how cold it is outside, and also how much you're opening and closing the lid to the Pit Boss, that's all going to change how long your pork butt takes to cook. But this is going to be an all-day cook, so make sure to plan accordingly. Now with pulled pork, it's always better to be finished early, so if you've got guests coming at a certain time, give yourself a good buffer. It's okay to finish an hour or two before you're going to eat. You can always hold it in a warm oven or right on the Pit Boss itself if you want. It's a lot better than everyone being hungry and the meat's nowhere close to being done. You're also going to need a good temperature probe to keep track of your meat's temperature while it's cooking. You can use any internal meat probe you want. We like the ones from ThermoPro ourselves. You can also add a water pan next to the pork butt while it smokes to add a little more moisture to the cooking environment. If you don't have an internal probe thermometer, you can use an instant meat thermometer like this one from ThermoPro. After the first couple hours, if it looks like the outside of the meat is starting to dry out, you can always spritz it with a little bit of apple juice or cola. This can help keep the outside of the meat from drying out in the smoker. Now, once the pork butt gets to about 150 degrees internally, we're going to wrap it in aluminum foil. This is called the Texas Crutch. Now, you don't have to necessarily wrap it in foil, but be prepared for it to take a lot longer if you don't. You see, when big pieces of meat like brisket or pork butt are cooked low and slow and hit about 150 degrees internally, they tend to stall out, which means they stop rising in temperature. Sometimes they can stay at 150 to 160 degrees for hours and hours if you don't wrap them. When you wrap the meat in foil, it stops the evaporation and helps the meat power through the stall and cook a little faster. So when you're getting close to about 150, 155 degrees, take some heavy-duty aluminum foil and lay it out on a big table. We like to triple wrap ours to make sure we don't have any leaks. Next, take the pork butt off the pit boss and put it in the center of your foil and wrap it nice and tight. Once the pork butt's totally wrapped, we put it back on the pit boss in the same spot. We like to flip it over at this point so that the top, which may have started to dry out during the first part of the cook, is now on the bottom and will get a little more moisture. Place your probe thermometer back in the center of the meat, making sure not to touch the bone. You're going to leave it wrapped and continue cooking on the pit boss until it gets to an internal temperature of about 197 to 203 degrees. Once your internal temperature hits about 200 degrees, remove the pork butt from the pit boss. We recommend putting it in a big aluminum pan. That'll help contain the juices when you start to unwrap it so you don't lose them. Be careful when removing the aluminum foil from the pork butt as hot steam can escape. Once we've removed our pork butt from the aluminum foil, we like to put it back on the pit boss for about another 20 to 30 minutes just to firm the bark back up. After about 20 to 30 minutes, take the pork butt off the pit boss and put it back in the aluminum pan. We recommend letting it rest for about 20 minutes before you start pulling it. Now, if your pork butt finishes early on the pit boss and it's not time to eat yet, don't pull the meat just yet. You can turn the temperature down on the pit boss to about 190 degrees and hold it right there until it's time to pull and eat. Or you can put the aluminum tray right in the oven at about 180, 190 degrees and keep it there as well. When it's time to pull the pork, you can use 2 forks to shred it, or better yet, a pair of barbecue bear claws like these make the job even faster. It should fall apart pretty easily at this point, but as you're pulling, just start with the forks together and pull apart in a crosswise pattern. Take out the bone and any really large pieces of fat, although most of it should have rendered at this point. Once you finish pulling the meat, you're going to test it for seasoning, and you're likely going to need to add some salt. We actually like to add some salt and apple cider vinegar to give it some acidity as well. Add a little bit of apple cider vinegar and salt at a time, mix it up, and continue to test until it tastes the way you like it. Now, we like to let our guests add their own sauce rather than dousing the whole tray of pork in barbecue sauce. And as far as sauce for pulled pork, our hands-down favorite is Blues Hog Tennessee Red Sauce. It's got a good amount of spice, acid, sweetness, and gives you a really authentic, vinegary, Carolina pulled pork flavor. It really counterbalances and cuts through the rich fattiness of the smoked pit boss pulled pork. Now keep in mind a little bit goes a long way because it has a lot of flavor. Now you can serve your pit boss smoked pulled pork as is, with a little bit of barbecue sauce, on some large brioche buns for an extra level of flavor. Serve it up with a little coleslaw or baked beans, and you're all set. Hey guys, thanks for watching, and let us know in the comments below how your pulled pork turned out. And if you have any other tips or techniques you like to use when smoking pulled pork, we'd love to hear about those as well. Make sure to check out our full lineup of Pit Boss recipes at madbackyard.com. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching.